Good evening. Welcome to the Blanc Township Board of Trustees and our meeting for Tuesday, July 24th. Mr. Mansour, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, and we would like to start our meeting with the approval of the consent agenda and our regular agenda. For both agendas, Ms. Lane? Okay.
Support.
Okay, there's a motion, support, and discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we will move to citizen comments. So we'll start here in the front of the room and work our way back. Anybody in the second row or anyone in the third row would like to comment? Okay. Okay, and then moving back to the back row. Mr. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kim. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You skipped the four.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Jet Kilmer, and I live at 2336 East Maple Avenue, Flint, Michigan 48507, but I don't live in Flint, Michigan. I really live in Blanc. And that's the reason that I'm here, is in 2013, I made a very strong effort to get the zip code change for the Flint 48507 area of Blanc geographically, and was turned down in Detroit. And so we thought we had sent everything to Washington. That never happened based on the person we were working with. And so it just didn't happen. I think it's very important for Blanc. I think it's very important for the people, the 1,000 families that live in that area to get their zip code changed. I think it's very important for our businesses to have it changed. And there are multiple reasons why. So the township has sent out letters, and I appreciate that, to all of the people that are affected by Flint 48507. We have 658 letters that came back of people saying they want the zip code changed. We have 92 businesses that sent a letter back saying they want it changed. So I know it's a priority with the township. The problem is that we get busy and there's so many things that are going on. So I met with Security Credit Union this morning. They went through an attorney to change the Holly area of Blanc to 48439, which is where Tech Village is going to be. What has happened there is they sent it to Detroit. It was declined. They sent it to Washington, and they're waiting. So we are going to reach out to Congressman Kildee. He doesn't have any authority to do anything, but he can get an answer as to whether they're going to approve it or consider it or anything. So the reason I'm here today is because changing it to 48439 is good for business. It will affect many things in regards to location, to identification, to liability insurance, and it's also very important to your constituents here. So the reason I'm here today is I know it is a priority with this board of directors. I'm hoping that we can keep it on the agenda and we can meet and that we can get this done in this year. Time goes by and we just get busy. We're all busy, and it really is a way of life for all of us. So the request from the chamber board and from myself is that we keep it in the forefront and we work together and we meet and we make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Can we ask some questions, Supervisor Bennett?
With regard to the
Zip code. When I was doing some investigative work on this, and I'm trying to find this, but one of the interesting things that I found when I was going through this with Mr. Kilmer is that this has to be launched by the municipality in the area to Detroit, and then from Detroit they have 40 or 60 days to make a decision. And if they don't make the decision in Washington, D.C., the post office is under the administrative branch, the executive branch of D.C. But if they don't make a decision within the 60 days after they receive it, then our representative which would, in this case would be Rep. Dan Kildee, he can take it and ask for a hearing. But it has to be all gone through by us, our municipality. So would it be proper if I could work with Attorney Laddie on this?
Let's bring it back to our task force first, because we've gone around the block on a few things, and we can bring you up to speed on. It's a little more complicated than that.
Well, I got the overview and everything from the Senator Debbie Stabenow earlier this morning, after some inquiries that Mr. Kilmer, Mark Kilmer, Jed's husband, and I made last week.
I'll give you an example. One of the things, actually, the postmaster has a board that they report to.
Right, in Detroit.
Currently, the postmaster for the United States has a board, because this goes to Washington, D.C. The last time we checked, Ms. Kilmer, myself, Ms. Lane, there was no board appointed at that point under President Obama. And so the board is made up of governors of various states, and we thought that, that's probably going to be a political decision. But it gets pretty in-depth. But if you want to hear more about it, we can get together. But I'd rather not do that here, because it gets into the weeds pretty deep. But if you want to be included in that, we can include you in those discussions.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Erd? Thank you, Mr. Kilmer.
Editor, 7212 Porter Road. I had a chance to make the Fire Commission's meeting on Tuesday. It was kind of interesting. TV 12 was there. Mayor was there. Some things went on I really didn't like, but I want to get into that. I do want to get into the mayor talking on the television though. She talked about not wanting to have a millage ask the people for money. It wasn't necessary. I just want to say, her talk and the actions of their government are two different things. The mayor says she didn't want to ask for funding for the fire department. Wasn't necessary, the degree that the fire commission wants. But they did continue to levy a millage for parks and recs, which was not needed, which they haven't used. They've never used it. They stockpile it. They should give it back to the residents. $600,000 sitting there that they don't use. They shouldn't have even levied it in the first place. Once they realize they're not going to use it, they shouldn't have levied it. Just cut it off. This board does that. Mosquito millage, they don't need the money. They don't levy the whole amount. That's the way to do business. So really, they owed every man, woman, child there $70. Give them their money back. So I don't like when the mayor says you don't want to give money. They're the worst people at it, especially in that event. And then, I guess that's enough on that one. They shouldn't have done that, and they're saying they won't do it. Well, it's needed in the fire department. So I say shame on the mayor for meddling in the township's democratic process. This board's ballot proposal. She's meddling in it. And the city council and the mayor have done nothing. No resolution, no motion to do anything about this. Nothing. This board merely approved the fire commission's recommendation for a millage. After a year worth of hammering it all, picking it apart and doing it, and the city was right there, and they just fought it all the way. They don't want to do it. So, again, shame on the mayor and the city council for doing nothing. And the city council and the mayor views the growth in this town. They've looked at this over the years, this last year, and better. That growth, more income in the township. And they look at it as though it's a way to fund their services in the city. That's what they're doing. The growth requires fire protection in those areas. That's where that funding needs to go. So I'm going to skip this one because you've heard this before from me. But anyhow, I just want to say the longest response time in the city is the shortest response time in the township. Just think about that. That's not right. There's obviously something wrong with that. I won't take up too much more of your time. I sat there with Hans Rogers back in 2010 about this, the last millage we had. And he actually himself was thinking about going on his own because he was bucking headwind from the city. That wouldn't be a problem today if that happened back then. We would have no problem. So, I've got 1 million notes and files on this thing. And all of these meetings we've had with the city over the year and all the money we've spent on them. It's accomplished nothing with them people. This township's ballot language is for fire protection. Are the meddlers assuming, and you know what I mean by meddlers, there's more than what's on our ballot? Our ballot's for fire protection, that's all. Doesn't say anything else that I know of. These are only, and I'll wrap this up for you. These are only a few of the many reasons I'm asking this board to dissolve our partnership with the city council and the mayor. I'm saying the mayor and city council because I believe that the township has always been a good neighbor to the city residents. And we will continue, even if we're not partners with them, despite their interference in our democratic system. It's a public safety issue. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Erb. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, with that, we are going to move on to our next item on the agenda, which we have a privileged presentation, and we're going to get an update and overview from Parks and Recreation Commission, Township Representative Tom Pettit. And just for the public's information, we just, our board met out at Bicentennial Park along with the Parks and Rec Commission, and our Parks Director, Kay Edson, and Assistant Director, and took a tour of the park and looked at some of the work that's been done with the millage that was passed, and looking at what some of the future projects may be. But park looked very nice out there. So, Mr. Pettit, good evening.
Yes, sir. My name is Tom Pettit. I live at 2424 Green Acres Road. I've been a resident of Grand Blanc since 1955. I graduated from Grand Blanc High, so I've been around here for a long time. Part of the property that is the Bicentennial, when they made I-75, they cut a corner of that off, and it was because it was landlocked. It was given to the Parks and Rec, or at the park at that time, given to the park when the land was donated. But anyway, like I said, I graduated from Grand Blanc. I ran the baseball program, the Little League program out there for 15 years before I went on the Parks and Rec board. So I've been quite involved with the Parks and Rec, especially at Bicentennial Park. I've watched it when my father used to graze cattle back there to where it is now. And I still have people come up and remind me of that one of the neighbors over there, one of his cows got out and ate his garden one summer, and I still hear about that. But anyway, with the Parks and Rec, what you've seen out there, there's not much that I can add to it that what you've seen out there. The few points that I would like to emphasize on the parks, one of the things that we've done, we've tried to, in our millages and every project we've had, we've tried to make it so that it was a capital improvement project rather than a maintenance or adding personnel or something there. In other words, we were trying to get something that was more long-term than just adding people or something there. If you notice, a lot of the structures and a lot of the things that was built out there was built with the intent of lasting for a long time. I mean, some of that stuff's been out there for 40 years before it was updated. And a lot of things there. The Little League building, for instance, out there that I referred to, I worked as a general contractor when we built that about 20 years ago as a general contractor. And that was a lot of arm twisting and getting funds to donate that. But it was, we raised the funds, the Little League did, and we used it and built that there. But going back to the Parks and Rec, Kay give you an overview of everything that we're doing there and where we've using the money, and you'll notice all the projects have been along the line of brick and mortar, as they refer to it, something that'll be there for a long time and last for a long time. One of the projects that I feel very strong about that we've just completed was the security system out there. In this day and age, when it comes to, I'll say catching somebody, you either catch them on a security camera or DNA. That's about the only two ways now that anybody's ever prosecuted. A witness isn't even a good, reliable source anymore. It's on camera or DNA, and with the camera system out there and the fact that we have trails out there and so many people out there, there's a lot of activity going out there. So, you know, there's a lot of us that felt real strong about that. And I have to give Kay a lot of credit for a lot of things, her and Jamie, for the time and effort that they put into a lot of this stuff. I mean, it makes it easy a lot of times when she makes some of this presentation and some of the research that they've done on this to make it so that we are getting the biggest bang for a buck. And probably one of the good examples is, we didn't even walk over to it, is the splash pad over there. You know, whenever you've got water on a cement, you got to have some kind of surface that people aren't falling. And they looked at something that was going to cost us at $17,000, and we were able to find now at Home Depot a paint that would cost us $1,000 to put on there that's non-slip, that's adequate, and will do the job what the $17,000 would have done. And even at the maintenance level of it, doing it every other year or for a few years down the road, whatever we would have put down there would have never lasted what would have worked out with the paint. So, I mean, that's one example, but a lot of things we go over in the security system out there. We didn't see all the cameras, but we probably got 25, 30 cameras out there. I'm not sure where we ended up with the last number on it, but it's at 28 or something like that cameras that are out there. I mean, we got all your license plates numbers and everything that the people that went in there and the people that walked through the gates and stuff like that. So I think that that is a real bonus for the parks out there that really don't show up in a lot. But as you can see, how many people are out there using it. And if you went out there right now, there'd still be people out there using them. They're always kicking people out at dark when it's time to close the park down. So with that, I'd like to, if there's any questions or anything that people have, I think that most of the questions you already asked when you was out there and that, but there's some areas that need some work. The maintenance building out there is, for what the guys got to do and maintain the equipment out there, isn't the most adequate, you know, right now.
I'd like to commend you for in the Parks Commission, Kay, for the fundraising that you do and generate, you know, the amount of money that you do that goes back into the parks, whether it's through the pavilion rentals. I think one of the things that we talked about, and I'll just bring it up here so it's our public is aware of it, but you know, the Fire Sticks tournament that you had that had how many teams?
94 teams, and there was another tournament there that had 8 teams there, so we had 100 teams. Almost all, a big majority of them was out of town. And if you was to check at the Chamber of Commerce, you'd find out that all the hotels was full, and all the restaurants in this area were busy with people in them from out of town spending their money.
Right, so you figure about, what was it, 90 teams?
94 teams.
94 teams times what, about 20 to 30 people?
Yeah, 25 to 30 people.
So that's quite a few people.
Yeah.
I don't know what the economic impact is on the community, but it's got to be significant. And I think, you know, we're looking at the park as just, you know, a place for local people. It's also a place that we welcome people from outside our community to see what Grand Blanc Township's all about.
Right, and from early May up to, it starts dying out this time of year as you get into August and that. There's almost a tournament out there every weekend from outsiders coming in here.
So I mean, for people coming to Grand Blanc Township from outside the area, it's their first impression of our township. And if they have a great impression of how our parks are run and how they look, it's a reflection on our township. So I think it's a great vehicle. I mean, if you're in business, you're looking for ways to bring new customers in, and as a township, we're looking at ways, how do we bring new people here to see what we have. So I commend you for running, you know, those tournaments and attracting them and keeping them coming back, because they obviously have other locations they can go to around the state.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you're talking about people that come from out of town, but I think the greatest benefit are to the residents and the families that are here programs that start with pre-K all the way up through high school and then into these adult things. So our community has always benefited first.
Yeah, well, I think that, I'm not sure which is better, but the tournaments allow us to have a park for the residents.
Right.
So I think the one plays into the other. I'm not sure it's one or the other.
Yeah, we talked about the big pavilions out there. We have 2 little pavilions that are rented just as much as the big pavilions are out there, you know, for small birthday parties or stuff like that, you know.
Right. Yeah, the pavilions look very nice. The camera system, the security system looks very good. The fields, very impressive with how they look. And we have more work planned for those. So overall, it's a great park system that we have there. Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to our consent agenda. We already passed that, so we'll move past that to future positioning. And we have our board subcommittee reports. I know that going down to business, the appearance and appeal of Grand Blanc Township, Mr. Mansour, Mr. Massey, and myself met briefly to talk a bit about maybe doing some focus groups. I know one of the things that we're looking at this fall is that it might tie in with is we're looking at our master plan, and whether or not we begin that will become before our board, but I think that would include a number of focus groups or forums that we would have around the community. Either of you want to speak on that a little bit, on our discussion and what we're looking at? Because we're going to ask for some money, which we need to meet with Mr. Limata and talk through that a little bit further. But
So I'll just say a couple of words. So both with respect to the business attractiveness and restaurants and retail and planning and zoning, we think that we're going to really get a benefit from engaging the public, both residents and businesses from those, to get input and to really start to build some community support for the kind of initiatives we want to take here. These particular areas, we talked a minute ago about how the parks create a impression when people come to the township. What we really want to do with these 2 initiatives is really amplify that, get some specific things going to really you know, build the brand, start to build the brand of the township. So anyway, in both of these cases, whether it's business attractiveness or planning and zoning, we are planning to have focus groups, as Supervisor Bennett mentioned. We'll be spending planning to spend some money on creating some renderings of some things that we want to look at in terms of you know, signage and some thought starters in terms of what some alternative retail space might look like, where it might be located around the township. But those are just some places to start, and we really want to get some input from people who live and work here and have businesses already. So we will be making a funding request. Superintendent Limata did forward us forms. So over the next week here, I think by the end of the month, those are due back, so I'll be submitting those.
Technology Village, Mr. Limata, I know I had it highlighted to mention something with that, but is there anything that we need to be looking at specifically? We have the DDA that we'll be putting that together in the next couple of months, so that committee probably will interact with the DDA, I would guess.
The board mentioned at the last discussion about the board's strategic agenda items that Tech Village would be maybe a good one to highlight in your conversation in July. So, and I think you're right. I think with the Tech Village area, it really is with the DDA moving forward and into August. We're probably 45 days in, something like that, David, with our 60-day from our announcement. We're moving along close to being ready to form the board, and I think that's probably where the conversation should go with your Tech Village subcommittee, even is a little bit about how that process is going to look like as you form the DDA board. What kind of candidates are you have you advertised, have you reached out to folks? Might be a good point of conversation for that subcommittee to discuss.
So I have had a few board members forward some names. I think, one of the things that we're prioritizing as far as board members are people that either own property in that area or represent businesses in that specific DDA area, or are able to bring something to the table, whether it's legal advice or financial, what have you, but that have a vested interest in the growth of that area. I have a list that I'm working off of that and contacting some individuals to serve on that, and as we get closer to that time frame where we'll be establishing the board, I'll bring those forward as a group for you to look at. On our planning that we put together, as far as our strategic plan, we had under Tech Village a few bullet points. I don't need to read through all of them, but one of the first ones was to establish a DDA in the southeast township area to promote development, which is underway. Another one was to provide a fully built out Tech Village development, which we're working on, and we've had a number of contacts with Mr. Limita for interest in the area. And that's an ongoing effort to work with potential developers. Another one was to encourage an expansion of technology park type development, to encourage implementation of super high-speed fiber optic availability, to enhance availability of interconnected mass transit, connecting all of Grand Blanc with Genesis campus and that Tech Village area, and to encourage MDOT on construction of fully functioning I-75 interchanges. So we're well into the process. Our strategy was to, counsel with our legal team with regard to reviewing the DDA process, which Mr. Vladdy's done, as well as Mr. Limita with the board, and we've initiated the steps for the DDA. So we're well underway, and I think we're going to see some good things coming in a few months here. Anything anybody wants to add on Tech Village? Okay. Anything else on any of the future positioning? We heard at the last meeting that the Perry Farmstead had received approval for their historic recognition for their signage, and we'll be hearing more about that, I'm sure, in the future. Anything else on those?
Still waiting on the RFPs. I talked to Mickey, by the way, Mickey, former supervisor Mickey Hoffman is doing very well after her back surgery. She's been up and walking around since last week, so that is really encouraging. In fact, most of you heard I was speaking to her again tonight. We're still waiting on the RFPs for the kitchen, so I can present those to Mr. Limita and to the task force, and that's where we're sitting. I was forwarded an email later this afternoon from Clerk Lane in regards to the barn that I will be forwarding to the Parks and Rec task force and also to the Perry Farm Homestead.
Were you communicating with them, Mr. Limita, or? Okay. Because I know we talked about it at the executive meeting, but, okay.
With what?
About communicating with the Historic Commission on the barn.
No, no, that was something, I didn't bring up anything in the barn. I got an email today from Clerk Lane about it, from email from 2002 or something that she found for me. We were talking about
Okay.
that I was going to forward over 2012 or something.
All right.
We had a conversation at executive committee about the barn, and I'm going to explore some options so that the board at least understands what that looks like, whether we remove that barn and what our options would be to remove it.
Well, I wasn't privileged to that conversation today.
Okay. All right. Mr.
Chair,
Massey?
going back to appearances,
Yes.
we need to have a conversation about the township hall sign out front. We need
Yes.
to replace that and update it with the electronic board.
Yeah. Let's, before we leave tonight, let's, three of us figure out a time we can do a conference call or talk
Okay.
with Mr. Limita.
Okay.
Okay, I agree. We need to look at that
Yes.
further. Okay. Next item on the agenda. is the fire millage ballot request update. So we, Mr. Massey, any comments on last week's fire commission meeting?
One unusual thing happened at that meeting is that the mayor of Grand Blanc City alleged that the shortfalls with the fire joint agreement with the township was caused by the township attorney, Laddie. We, the township board, disagree with that statement. I believe the comment by the mayor of Grand Blanc City is to kill the millage. There's no other conclusion that you can come to. But we're moving forward with the millage because the millage is needed for the future of Grand Blanc Township. It's needed for the schools to enhance safety at the schools. It's needed for the business community. It's also needed to protect our residents. So we're going to continue to move forward with the millage.
Okay. And I understand you set the record straight at the meeting with regard to that issue, with regard to Mr. Laddie and whatever blame they wanted to place on him with regard to this millage or something like this?
Yes, I did at that time. And when the meeting was over, the mayor came up to me. She was very disturbed because I was defending the township. Well, that's what I was elected to do. I don't know what the mayor had in mind, but I know what I had in mind because the residents elect me to represent them at meetings.
Right.
But the mayor was very disturbed, though, the fact that she couldn't get away with her negative comments.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Massey. What are our board hearing, or what direction have you seen the millage going in? Any input from anybody on that? Mr. Guzak?
I know that all the residents that I've talked to in my subdivision all support it, and they see the need for it, so I'm seeing a lot of positive feedback in my subdivision, so. And other people around the roundabout, because I've been talking to those people too, and some of those people, you know, are all in support of it. They can see the value in it. So I'm getting a lot of positive feedback.
Okay. I have to say I was disturbed by the news coverage, not the news coverage, but the mayor speaking about the township millage, and I'm not sure why she chose to insert herself into our millage. That was very inappropriate. I wasn't available that evening, but the TV news network visited me the next day, and I gave our version of it, which a portion of it was aired. So, you know, I don't know if that had any influence on people or not on the way they're going to vote, but you know, I don't comment on other municipalities' millages or votes on elections unless it's going to affect our residents. So.
Supervisor Bennett, I just really have a issue with a minority member of our commission that supports our fire endeavors for the safety of our constituents that we were voted for, that pay 14% of our overall budget when we pay 86%, to get involved in a millage that has nothing to do with their municipality. And I just am very disheartened by this. I took it as an affront when they attacked our attorney, David Laddie, when our attorney and their attorney are the ones who worked out the ordinance 9 years ago. Am I correct, Attorney Laddie?
Correct.
So to come out publicly and name and chastise our township attorney, and it's just uncalled for, and I hope that you as our supervisor will take this very seriously, because it isn't an affront. It's an affront to our residents. You know, last year we paid $1.2 million. That's what we paid. $1.2 million. The city pays $200,000. Our resident, Ed Ert, made a great comment that the longest city residents have to wait is the shortest that our residents have to wait for fire service. That's just so poignantly said, Mr. Ert. When we're paying 86%, and we've heard from our fire chief repeatedly and repeatedly that it's best to have us going to a congested area for fire service and not out of a congested area. Am I correct, Chief Burdett?
Correct.
And we're paying the majority of the funding at a tune of $86 or 86 cents per every dollar. And then the mayor and the city council wants to butt into our millage. I hope that you are very, very, very strong in your rebuttal, Mr. Supervisor.
Well, our board has a chance to speak tonight on that issue, and I hope, if people feel strongly, we hear from our board members.
So,
Mr. Mansur?
yeah, I'd like to just have a couple comments. First, on the news coverage, I think Chief Burdett did an exceptional job outlining the crux of the elements in the few seconds that he was given on there, and so it was very convincing. And if people watched that coverage and looked at the man who was responsible for the fire department making those comments, I think that they should be persuaded by that. Thank you. The other point is that I find it hard to understand and see how this board can continue to try and be a partner with a city that seems to be intent on jeopardizing the safety the safety of our firefighters by not getting ahead of this thing and trying to make sure that they have the right equipment, right age of the equipment, etc. So just as we go forward here, it just seems to be difficult for me to understand how a city who thinks like that could be a good partner with us. Thanks.
Anyone else have any strong feelings on the issue? Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chair, I am in concurrence with the remainder or all of this board about,
Is your microphone off?
it's on,
Okay.
and some of the others are not as loud, but I concur with the other gentlemen in this board. In all of my years of living here and being on the board, I know the city and the township have occasionally had disagreements, but never did we ever jeopardize the safety of our community. And to me, the community includes the city and the township, and I know the fire department, since the inception of the township 185 years ago, they will fight fires to safeguard everybody, no matter what. So this particular city council and their leadership has just absolutely appalled me and shocked me at their unwillingness to work with us and to recognize what the fire commission and this board have decided is the best way to pay forward for the equipment we need and to have some money in the bank since we've been through this bad decision. 10 years ago, we had all the right objectives, but the recession hit us. We can't afford to do that again. And we as a board, and I believe in all of you, when we have it paid off, our new equipment, and we can reduce that millage, we will. And I have trust in this board and our fire department leadership and the fire commission because we're all in agreement. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Atkins.
Yeah, so the feedback I get from the residents after I attended the meeting, the joint fire meeting, just in the audience, I haven't heard, almost every comment I hear from the residents is, why is the township and this board acting as though we're the ones with 8,000 people versus the size of the township that we are. I think, and I've always told everyone that we try and be a good neighbor and work within a decent partnership with the city, but I think that's been called into question with that news conference, and I believe that most of the residents that I've talked to anyway would like to see the township self-sustaining with any of these agreements, especially the fire.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Yes.
You know,
Mr.
why would
Thomas.
we want to be in partnership with the city council in the city when our base of operations right in their middle? They're paying 14% of the overall budget. They didn't elect us, Mr. Supervisor. Our residents, Grand Blanc Township, did. Why would we want to be in partnerships with the city and the city council when there's, for the last 2 years, starting these task force meetings, they've been so adversarial against us? The numbers came up with the fire commission, which is made up of the city council, the township trustee, people at large, folks, residents at large. They came to us with the numbers. We did our due diligence. We went through the numbers, combed through them month after month after month, meeting after meeting after meeting. And what we did is we agreed with the fire commission, with our chief and the fire commission. Let me reiterate this. There's city council members on that fire commission, and our representatives voted unanimously. Am I correct, chief? Unanimously to come to both boards, and we accepted what they brought to us. Why would we want to be in a partnership with something like that? We can't do that to our residents.
Well, Mr. Thomas, I think, you know, one of the things we've said for the last 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, prior to this board even being seated, was that we thought we were better off together. And I think, you know, that's been called into question. I mean, we're dealing with an adversary at this point. I would like to read something that regarding this situation, kind of encapsulates a little bit of the history behind it and just a few thoughts. But 2.5 years ago, Grand Blanc Township discovered a serious shortfall in its joint fire operation with the city of Grand Blanc. The city refused to meet regarding the issue for a year, as verified by a FOIA request from the Grand Blanc View. The city actually thought it was paying too much for fire service and expressed that to our superintendent. While this is a joint fire operation, the township does pay $1.2 million annually and the city just $200,000. It is the township's contention that no other municipality in Michigan has a full-time 24/7, 365 days a year fire department located in the middle of its city for just $200,000 a year. The real question, I think, is whether the city of Grand Blanc is paying its fair share for fire services. The township has a proposal that we will be bringing forth to answer that question after the millage vote. Township agrees with the fire commission, and as Mr. Thomas mentioned, made up of appointees from both the city and the township and at large, that we need the millage before the voters on August 7th to keep our full-time fire department and to purchase needed capital equipment such as fire trucks, fire apparatus, firefighter clothing, air tanks, etc. If the millage does not pass, we'll be forced to go back to an on-call operation. The on-call fire department will translate into higher homeowners and business insurance and will certainly curtail any further growth in our area. The city bases its funding model on a 10-year projection using percentages of growth that we haven't witnessed since the 1990s. The Fire Commission and the township have a much more conservative approach to the projections and are actually proposing a millage that is adjusted downward based on actual annual growth. The reason why the fire department is unfunded now is because the previous 10-year projection model used for the fire operation doesn't work. The funding model as presented by the city would not adequately fund our capital expenditure needs. The township proposal for the fire millage will cost the owner of a $200,000 home about $100 per year for fire protection. Because the township funds nearly 90% of the fire operation, we must get it right this time. The current fire operation with a full-time staff, reduced response times, to less than half of what it was when the fire department was on call. If we go back to on-call service, our run times are more than double. In the city of Grand Blanc, run times are probably not an issue because, as Mr. Thomas mentions, that our building that our fire department operates out of, our full-time fire department operates out of, is right in the middle of the city. The township covers 32 square miles, the city 4 square miles. The city has 8,000 residents, the township has 38,000 residents, plus a significant amount of businesses, hospital patients, retail outlets. Grand Blanc Township Board has made the decision to present this millage based on what is best for our residents and very successful businesses. We are working hard to keep Grand Blanc Township a premier community. We are not willing to risk the lives of residents, visitors, students, or the value of property on old substandard equipment and an on-call fire operation. Because township residents are funding nearly 90% of the fire operation, we believe they should be the ones deciding what type of fire department we should operate. Are the residents of Grand Blanc Township willing to wait an additional 8 minutes for a fire truck to be at their house, an accident scene, school, or business when there's an emergency? When this millage passes, it will allow us to compel the city to pay its fair share for fire services. We are not going to endanger, at least I'm not going to vote, to endanger our residents and firefighters over a $25 difference. And that's what we're looking at, folks, is a $25 difference between what the city says they would agree to and what we're saying we need. Please vote yes on the township millage.
Very well said, Mr. Supervisor.
Thanks, Ms. Lane. It really is a matter of, we aren't stockpiling money. We aren't looking to build the Taj Mahal. We're not looking to inure our firefighters. Our firefighters work very hard and are probably, you look at across the township and we're not at the top of the pay scale. We're not paying for unfunded liabilities with this money. We're not paying down debt. What we're trying to do is make sure that we have the capital equipment to be a premier fire department in a premier community. We see what other communities around us, what happens when you cut things short, whether it's your water system, whether it's your police, whether it's your fire. And we cannot afford to cut things short when we're a growing community and we want to grow. How many Magnas, how many Genesis, how many McLarens are going to want to build their businesses here with a part-time or on-call fire department? They aren't going to want to locate here. And I think that's also why the chamber has endorsed this millage. And I think we probably will have another announcement. I don't know. So the UAW has endorsed the millage as well. But I think all of us at this board here feel responsible for our residents, our businesses, and we cannot go cheap on this. This is not something that we cut corners on. It is our fire department. So, Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask that the information that you just recently provided become part of the minutes.
Okay, that could happen. Is there any issue with that, Mr. Lanning?
No, sir.
Okay. So I don't know that there's any action that we take tonight, but I think, it's unfortunate that it's come to this, but I think we're going to move forward strongly over the next 2 weeks with getting this millage passed. And after it passes, as I said, I think what we really need to do, Mr. Lehman has been exploring some things, but we need to take a look at how we compel the city to pay its fair share and our residents get a fair shake on what they're paying. Anything else on the fire millage?
Been well said by everybody,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Mr. Thomas?
Maybe the chief should speak up.
Chief Burdett, could you come forward? I think are the one that communicated on the endorsement. I don't know, do you want to say a few words about that?
Well, thanks to trustees Thomas's help this week, Art Reyes from the UAW CAP Council received the votes to endorse the fire millage, as well as the Chamber of Commerce and numerous other groups have stepped forward also with the fire department. So it's a great endorsement from the UAW.
Well, it was because you and Supervisor Bennett spoke very highly with the
Yeah.
auto work.
You put us together.
Well,
We just did the groundwork.
Chief, I don't know if you have this number, but, you know, we know how many residents live in Grand Blanc Township, but, and maybe Mr. Lehman knows this number as well, or Chief Wiles, but, I mean, I have to believe that our population, and maybe even Ms. Kilmer from the Chamber would know, but our population has to grow sizably during the course of the business day.
Mhm.
I don't know what number that is, but, I mean, we're talking...
To be honest with you, I am not sure how much
We're
businesses
talking
grow.
40,000 people that are sleeping here at night. But
Correct.
how many are here working during the day has to be a sizable number.
I really have no idea how much that is. You know, I've heard the city of Troy, of Auburn Hills, their population doubles easily when during a work week. So
Right. I mean, even the tournament,
Good
I mean,
point.
there's incidents that happen, you know, that would require emergency help there. I mean,
well, the tournament alone coming up, I think we're anticipating probably about 15, 20,000 people coming to that.
Oh, the golf
That's
tournament.
a low figure, I'm sure it is.
right. And that's just one weekend. That
Yep,
they're
one
packed.
weekend.
Yep.
So
Okay,
All right.
Mr. Guzek, did you have anything?
No, I just wanted to
Okay.
thank you for your comments. I thought it was well
Okay,
spoken,
thanks.
and
Thank
I
you.
agree with
and
everything you
thank you,
said.
Mr. Supervisor.
Yeah,
Appreciate
and
that.
you know what, we're gonna work hard to get this millage, so.
Thank you.
We know that
Appreciate
the
it.
fire department is critical, it's just, you know, you look at a community of where you wanna move, and it's schools, police, fire,
Right.
you know, and what amenities you have for business, you know, the parks, and this is one of the key components, this isn't like an extra. This
No,
is,
It isn't.
I don't know if people realize this, but, you know, there is a fire rating for a community, and a fire rating for individual businesses, what have you. You have a part-time fire department, that fire rating
It's a substantial
shrinks
cost.
substantially, and it causes, as I mentioned, your homeowners or business insurance to
That's
go
very
up.
true. Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
okay, we're looking
Thank you
forward to the
again.
passage of this millage.
Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, next item on the agenda is our 2019 budget overview. And Mr. Lemata, would you like to speak?
Mr. Supervisor, I did send out a couple of different transmittals to the board in regards to the 2019 budget process. This is really on the agenda just to remind you that make sure you look those over. I have a schedule in there that you can follow to show exactly what we had anticipated as far as moving through the process right up to the budget being approved by the board no later than December 31st of the year, obviously. And I believe that Trustee Mansour and Supervisor Bennett both already today acknowledged the process of making requests to get into the budget for expenditures that the board may want to do in regards to their strategic agenda and carrying out some of the strategic items in there. We're happy to provide whatever information that we get from that. And you know, we've got time to put the budget together. We can discuss those all the way through until it has to be to the board by the beginning of September. So if there are something as you go through your subcommittee and something comes up, whether it's just wondering if there is an expenditure that's allowed or if it's an expenditure that, I mean, just give me a call or stop in and or route them through Supervisor Bennett. We'd be happy to look into all of those.
All right, anything else on that? Okay. Our next item under operational issues, the board will consider a motion to approve the request to pave the portion of Pollock Road from Holly Road to the second crosswalk, utilizing the remaining 2018 township road funds combined with a Genesis Health System contribution. So I just want to mention that this isn't this is allocation from the road commission that we're looking at using.
It's the remaining, if you guys recall, the amount that was in the supplemental funds that Lansing pushed out to the road commissions, and we did Cook Road with that. There are $28,243 left in the supplemental funds. In addition, we have $21,966 in our 50/50 allocation funds that the road commission has to match. That's a total of $72,153 that the township has available to complete road project for 2018. The key here is that we're running out of time as far as getting it approved and move forward. Pollock Road clearly is one that we've heard about. Every one of you sitting in those seats has had a conversation about Pollock Road at some time or another, and it's generally recognized as one of the worst roads in. While this is a far cry from getting all of Pollock Road done, it would provide it from Holly Road to the second crosswalk by the employee parking lot with just a 3-inch cap over that road. It's not meant to be a 20-year repair. It's meant to be exactly what it is, a Band-Aid, but we do believe that once the Dordt Highway extension is completed, that Pollock Road becomes a primary road and then becomes the responsibility of the Genesee County Road Commission versus trying to create a special assessment district, which we did try to do, but it wasn't able to generate enough support. A big portion of this would require that Genesis would participate, and the remaining funds for Genesis would be $121,270. I know Supervisor Bennett made a call. I don't know if you heard back.
I've not heard back, no.
It's more than what we had initially expected it to be based on an estimate we had from last year, but because of the deterioration of the road surface, I think that they moved it from a 2-inch cap to a 3-inch overlay, just to try to get any length of actual longevity out of the repair.
Right. And it's, I just want to mention, it's the road commission that came to us with this project. They said that they would put their portion of the money up for this road, so they selected it as needing the work, so it was on their agenda.
And so while we're asking you to take a look and consider approving this request, it directly hinges upon Genesis participation. If they do not come back and agree to participate at the amount $121,270, then we'd have to reallocate those funds to another area. And Director Sears is here. There are 2 other projects that we could look at, one being Howe Road, one being gravel on Gray Tracks Road, or put gravel some other places. We also have the option of saving the $28,243 in supplemental funds. Fred Pravandi said that he would allow us to wrap those into the 2019 year if we didn't move forward with this project, just so you know.
Mr. Mansour?
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the request to pave the Pollock Road, the portion of Pollock Road from Holly to the second crosswalk at Genesis, with the remaining 2018 township road funds predicated on $121,000 contribution from Genesis.
So, second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Second item under operational issues, the board will consider a motion to approve the request of Parks and Recreation, K. Edson, to award the bid for field and pavilion improvements to the lowest responsive bidder, Kennedy Excavating, the amount of $195,043.36, and authorize the superintendent to execute all agreements. This project will be paid from the Parks and Recreation millage funds and was a budgeted expense in 2018.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Support.
Okay. Any discussion?
Mr.
Yes.
Chair,
Mr. Massey?
is this part of replacing the floor?
In the
Pavilion?
south pavilion?
Yes.
Yes.
I have some concerns about that, because I asked the director, what guarantee will she get for cracks? I mean, the years. Because based on what I saw hour and a half ago, it appears that crack is sort of better than some driveways and some basements. The homes that have been most recently built that I can observe.
No, I'm not the director, but I'll help.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Mr. Wheatley, McKay, there's some cracks even in the new one, right? So the new pavilion, you go towards the end, away from the football fields, and there's cracks in the flooring of the new one. They do have some, stress, whatever you call them, where they cut,
Control joints, yeah.
Stress lines that were put into the concrete. I don't know if they saw those after they pour it or what happens, but looks like the cracks went right across those anyways. I don't know if maybe they occurred before they sawed those in, but I don't know, are the cracks different at the two different places, or is there, I looked around to see if there's any kind of difference in the height. I know the grilling area was substantially, raised up in that small pavilion, but I don't know. I understand what Mr. Massey's saying, though.
The South Pavilion that we're talking about
Right.
does not have expansion joints. Those were poured in 2 long pours, and those cracks have just been increasing and getting worse, and I probably should have done a better job of pointing those out to you. I mean, there's some holes also in the floor, and I think we're probably to a point of whether it's sooner or later that we're going to have to replace it. We've been talking all night about making Grand Blanc a premier community. I think when people come out to that pavilion to rent it, they're looking for,
Right.
A premier facility
Yeah, we
too.
definitely want that.
And I don't know what else you have to add, Jack, as far as he's more the construction end.
Well, yeah.
So Jack, you've seen the cracks out there. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, all concrete's gonna crack. It just depends when and how. There's like shrinkage cracks, which you almost always get, which is a very fine crack, which usually doesn't cause many issues. But we try to control those. Like you said, we have control joints in there. On the pavilion, though, it didn't have any expansion joints or control joints, and so it's just been under siege, I guess, by constant moving and cracking. So, I can't guarantee there wouldn't be cracks in new concrete, because there typically is. We try to control them, but it's just hard to. I mean, this will be split down into 10-foot by 10-foot squares with control joints. So every 10-foot square of concrete will be saw cut to hopefully control those, move those joints into those areas, or those cracks. I mean, that'll inevitably happen.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Massey?
my concern is, and I think you have echoed it very well, what happens after you pour 2 years, you have more cracks than you have now? What happens?
Well, we'll have a 2-year maintenance guarantee bond, so if there's more cracks in there now, we'll have them replace it. But
So what is the
that should
warranty?
not be the case.
What is the warranty?
It's a maintenance guarantee bond that we require at the end of most all of our projects that we do with the township. It's a bond that gives us 2 years of kind of a guarantee on the maintenance and the construction of the project.
So it's sort of a toss-up, it's a gamble that we take in if we replace it.
No, I think you're going to get a good product. It'll last a lot longer than it will today. It's just like anything, a roof on your house or whatever. The longer you wait, the worse it's going to get, because the more cracks you have, the more water gets down the cracks, which freezes and causes the concrete to move more and causes more cracks. So,
Are you saying, did I hear you correctly? You're telling me, are you telling the board that your recommendation when the product is finished is going to be better than the product that's currently there?
yeah.
Well, a couple of things that Ms. Edson mentioned was that, it'll have re-rod and it'll have, expansion joints in it, which there isn't any re-rod or mesh or anything in it. Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, wasn't there mention that there's some drainage issues out there, and of course, you're gonna have different drainage within it, right? Drains and different things in it that is not in it now, is that correct?
Well, one of the alternatives is to add some storm sewer on the south side of the pad.
And is that part of this project?
Yes.
It is, right?
Mhm.
So we won't see the
The
water
water
drainage
sitting
problem
around
we've
it,
got, and then plus inside the actual arena, it's gonna be rerouted in there, plus is there drains tiles underneath it also?
No, there's no tiles
Just
underneath.
on the outside of it.
It'll be shed drained off of the pavement and towards these storm sewers that we're putting in.
So the construction of it should be because it was done a lot long, many years ago, should be far exceed what the construction
Yeah,
was done.
yeah, we're using newer mixes and concrete, and like you say, this time it'll have control joints and expansion joints
Right.
in it, so we should see a good long life out of the product.
Yeah.
Right, because we just did the basketball courts, and that's all outside, and of course, I looked at that and that looks really nice, and that's been, has it been 2 years now, or just 1 year?
2 years in the fall.
That's what I thought, okay, and that looks like
Yeah.
it hasn't been touched yet, I mean,
So that the new pavilion has like a sidewalk or concrete that goes beyond the pavilion roof. And it probably helps with drainage. Will this one be similar when it's
Yes,
finished?
that'll all
Okay.
be replaced also,
Okay.
and so will the pathway from the parking lot up to the.
Yeah, because there isn't sidewalk around, I mean, I'm talking about where the concrete extends beyond the roof.
beyond the
line.
roof, it goes outside of it.
So it does in portion of it, but doesn't on all of it. But the other pavilion, it does surround it, it seems like, but, I don't know. Mr. Atkins and then Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions actually. One is there a breakdown of what this 195,000, how much of that would represent just the water management repair, since they can be done independently of one another, or?
Yeah, this storm, that was alternate,
Two.
two.
So it's
So yeah, the base bid for both the field and the concrete pad on the pavilion was 164,000 approximately. To add the storm sewer that we're adding along the pavilion will be another 15,000.
So it's not in the 195.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
All three alternates are in
Yeah.
the 195.
In the field work, the field is the one behind it, right? The one
The one that's in front of the newest pavilion.
newest pavilion, that's the field work, and that's gonna cost quite a bit of money too, right? I mean, what's the amount of that?
We don't have it broken down. It's a base, we did a lump sum bid between
Oh,
the
okay.
pavilion slab and that field.
So
So
we're
the
not
field's
just doing
about two-
concrete, we're
two-
fixing the field as well as these other items, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
and putting irrigation in and, a well and electrical and so on.
So how much is it to repave the pavilion?
It's not broken out. It's probably in the 50,000 range, 50 to 60. But it's not broken out separately.
It's kind of hard for me to support approving this without seeing those items broken out for a couple reasons. One is I look at the pavilion in question. There's no doubt that there's water management that's required. That's pretty obvious in the photos. But looking at the condition of the concrete compared to the newer pavilion, the only real difference is the color. I mean, that one stood the test of time pretty good. I think the age difference is 20 some years between the two? Is that
Probably closer
Probably.
to 30.
30? So, the cracks that are in there, they're not raised, they're not a trip hazard. I don't see any real signs that needs to be replaced right at this this moment. And especially if the water management and the other repair to the field, is all independent issues. You could almost do it one at a time. So,
Well, I think that the whole project would have to be rebid, because the way it was done, there is no breakout with the exception of the alternates. So the field construction and the floor are one lump sum. The alternates are bid out separately.
it is the water management. Is that something?
That's an alternate.
Right. Is that a job that our employees could do? Is that a pretty simple job? I don't know what that entails, but I know we have a lot of equipment. We do a lot of things there.
Jeff, Mr. Director Sears on that.
Sorry.
That's right.
There's a few catch basins and then.
Mr. Mansour?
Superintendent Lehman, did you
Oh, I'm
have
sorry.
something?
My concern, if we look at the DPW doing it, I don't know if there's a cost savings with what it costs us from an employee standpoint and everything else with DPW getting involved in doing some of those water management projects. I just want to make sure that's out there. And also the cost, if we bid these out, if we go back and have to rebid this and rebid the concrete separate from the field. I think part of it is the mobilization. They're going to out there, they can do it all at once. The costs are going to go up if they're only going to do one or the other. I think that if you just eliminate the pavilion floor, you know, maybe it won't be driven up. But I think if you're only doing one, I think their idea was that they're doing an overall project, and so they gave you a bid on the mobilization of doing a bigger project. Right now, not a lot of people need work, as evidenced by the 2 bids that we received on this project. We may end up paying more in the long run, and I just want the board to consider that as well as they're making a decision.
Mr. Wheatley, in your opinion, I mean, you've been out there and looked at pavilion floor, right? Is it something that needs to be done? I mean, in your opinion, that, or I don't want to put you in the middle, but is it, are those cracks, I mean, they're obviously pretty deep cracks. They probably go through the entire,
Yeah, like, I mean, it's just a maintenance thing. If you do it, you know, if you don't do it, it's gonna continue to crack and probably get worse. And, you know, it's like anything else, the longer it waits, the more expensive it gets. So, I don't have a real strong opinion on it one way or the other. I know that it'll be difficult to pull that out as a bid.
right?
Because we're not gonna know, I mean, that guy's just gonna tell us whatever he wants. You know,
So the mobilization fee, we're paying that because we're doing a larger project, so it's gonna be
yeah,
more
we're
expensive
combining,
if we come
trying to
back.
get economy of scale here, so we're combining projects.
And it's gonna need to be done eventually. I know the new pavilion has some hairline cracks in it. They're probably nowhere near like the holes or cracks in the current one. Or I mean in the south pavilion, there's no re-rod or mesh in it, so
yeah, this
eventually it's gonna, you know, and you know, I gotta say that, you know, we talked about the basketball, and you know, this is a previous board, but the question was, well, how in the world did we let it get to this point? Well, things creep along, and if you don't catch them before they fall apart, they eventually fall apart. And
it's like the roads, you know, it kind of, once it starts taking off, it takes off faster and faster and faster, and it's just, you're trying to catch it at a time when it's,
right,
you know, still usable for the time being, but you're gonna have to replace it at some point.
Yeah, my only thought is that they don't look really bad right now. I'm just wondering, you know, how much more life. I guess it's anybody's guess. But Mr. Massey?
Yes, I have a technical question to ask. What is the depth of the stress relief and what is the width of the stress relief?
The what? What are you talking about? What's the depth of the concrete thickness?
No, well, is the stress relief, is it gonna be the same depth as the concrete thickness?
The 10 by 10
When they
cut you're
cut
putting
those.
in.
Oh,
I think
sorry.
that's what he's talking
No,
about.
you'll have I'm sorry, this pad's like 73 feet wide and 100 and over 100 feet long.
Yes.
So in that, every 10 feet in that 100 feet, there'll be a saw cut.
Yes,
One
that's
direction, and then every 10 feet.
Right, but how deep is the cut is what he's asking, I believe.
The depth of the
control
cut.
joints are cut about, you know, 1.5 inches to 2 inches deep on a 4-inch concrete slab.
So what is the width?
4 inch.
The width will be a 1/4 inch. And then you know, the expansion joints go all the way through.
Yes.
So those are, we put the fabric in so that as the concrete heats up.
How often are those? How frequently?
Those are more, you know, every 50 feet or so.
Right.
So they do put expansion joints all the way through the whole thing every 50 feet?
It just depends on how they lay it out, but yeah, approximately every 50 linear feet, and then they'll have it all around, you know, like where it meets the building, any structural items, the posts, those all have expansion joints around them.
Oh, okay.
Supervisor Bennett?
Yes.
Yeah, so I had a couple comments. I'm kind of at the same place as Trustee Atkins is. I mean, I take a look at the main floor of the pavilion, and I mean, it's you know, seemingly in still pretty good shape. I mean, it has a couple breaks around where you can see some re-rot around the perimeter, a couple places. But you know, we mentioned making this place, you know, look good, and based on our tour, we have, you know, shingles off the roof on that one pavilion that's in the south part that people can see driving by on the expressway. You know, we've got a leak in the roof of the shed where we keep, you know, $150,000 worth of our equipment. I mean, it just seems to me to be kind of off kilter to be worrying about this base of this pavilion that you know, the cracks are, you know, really minimal now. and you talk about doing it now or doing it later, you're proposing the most radical of fixes, ripping it up and completely replacing it. So this isn't like, a patch that we could do this year and last 2 more. So it just seemed to me to be kind of out of balance in terms of the things that really look like they were eyesores, things that could protect our equipment, versus a concrete slab that seems to be still pretty smooth, pretty even, and not buckling.
Well, as I explained when we were at the park, that the roof of the pole barn and those fixes are coming to you in the fall to be completed yet this year. We also are in the process of working with a construction manager who is going to come out and do a tournament with us, and in exchange is going to repair that roof on the pavilion that you can see from the expressway. Most of that damage is pretty recent from some recent storms in the last couple months. So those are definitely on the radar and are in the plans to be fixed as well.
All right, thank you.
There is a trip hazard leading out to that grill area though too. Mr. Atkins?
Just 2 other questions. So, to Mr. Limita's comment a little bit ago about the response you got back for bids, because this is probably a busy time of year, considering that we're still, expecting to rent out that pavilion, is there a better time of year that this should go out for bid, that the work maybe should be looked at?
Yeah, I mean, your options, we could rebid it in the winter, we like to bid stuff if we have the leisure. I don't know what the funding timing is and those types of things, but, we could try to split things out and rebid it in the winter, or, it depends on how your programming is set up with the pavilion. I don't know when that starts and ends, but, we wouldn't want to interfere with that. But yeah, we could, that's an option.
We start rentals in late April and go straight through. Currently, in the contract, there is it's the completion date. Our most completion date is by October 1st. We have blocked off the pavilion for 3 weeks so that it's available for construction.
So what kind of revenue are we looking at, general? Because if let's say that we said we were going to hold off doing it, but the rentals are $450, and they're pretty. Is it pretty well booked?
Well, at this point.
Well, right now it isn't, but typically.
It isn't because we've blocked it off, and most of those are. Most of the time you're looking at weekday rentals, which in August are more rare. Okay. But at the beginning of the season in the spring, when you're having school groups and that kind of thing, it's more frequent. So, right. We've kind of lost, if we go to next year in the spring, we've lost this revenue and then we're going to lose that revenue. Right. And we're looking at, what, about $1,200, $1,500 a weekend or something like that?
$450
If it's rented Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
$450
times
per day,
3.
though.
No.
I'm sorry?
Is it $450 for the weekend or $450 per day?
In the South Pavilion, I believe it's $350, and so it's $350 per day. So it's
Per day?
Yeah, but it's not running like that per day.
It's not.
on the weekends it is.
So that's $1,000
Weekends,
a
but
weekend.
not during the weekdays.
So $1,000 per weekend that you close down that you're missing out on. Miss Lane?
To this board, you've been out there and you've seen a beautiful park that the reason we had the millage was to get caught up on the maintenance that needed to be done there rather than let it continue to deteriorate. I think you saw what a Parks and Rec Commission and our director and assistant director have done to maintain it to the quality it is now without having the millage. I trust their judgment, along with Mr. Wheatley's guidance and the procedures we set up for this bid. The lane only makes it more expensive because you have additional ads and everything else you have to put in. I hope you walked away with more confidence, and I think these questions that you're asking are reasonable, but I think now is the time to move forward on this project with all the trust I have in the new procedures instituted by Mr. Limita and is working with Kay and Mr. Wheatley. Let's get the job done.
Yeah, Mr. Atkins?
I just have to point out, just as well as Trustee Mansour pointed out, I realize it's in the budget, I realize it's a project you're saying needs to be done, but you know, to your point about, you know, you made the comment that it's, you know, a maintenance thing. Well, if I look at, I just can't find myself to come to the passage of this personally, because if I look at that pavilion, that's almost 30 years old, and I look at the other pavilion, the other one has cracks in the floor as well. So if you can't show me some sort of a gauge or a metrics or what is expecting to happen or a trip or a safety issue, I just can't, I can't get there with approving this to rip that concrete out. If that's the case, then you should be proposing to replace the newer pavilion concrete. It's literally, if you're just judging by the aesthetic look of those cracks and you have no other data to back it up, then they both need redone. I mean, is the intent to make it to where there's not a crack? I mean, you know, it's still in great condition compared to the one that's relatively new.
Yes, this question, the add-on work, okay, so we've got, you know, drainage issue and we've got the area over there by the grill and that. But those need to be replaced
No
like
question.
immediately, there's no question
No
of that.
Plus the field stuff, the field.
No
Yeah.
question.
But as far as the pavilion though, that added stuff, those need to be done regardless of what we do. But does it make sense to do those and then have to come back in a few, I don't know how long the pad is gonna last, you know. I don't have any empirical data either that tells us how long that's gonna last, but I'm just wondering if, once you put those things in place, they'd probably stay in place regardless. You could still rip up the main pad and leave those in place, I would guess, I don't know. The grill area, that pavilion's probably poured separately from the main pavilion. And the sidewalk and the drainage is something separate from the pavilion itself. But, you know, one of the things that we like to do is to come to some kind of consensus and not just have a 3-4 or 4-3 vote or what have you. And I'd like to come to some kind of agreement that maybe puts us all at a comfort level. It sounds like, you know, we all agree that you know, the field needs to be done. I haven't heard any issue with regard to the field. I think we all can agree that that grill area definitely needs it and the drainage area definitely needs it. It sounds like the question is the main pad area, whether or not those cracks are either visual issues or if they're safety issues. And that, I'm not an engineer to be able to tell you whether they are or not. I don't know, Mr. Wheatley, are those safety issues, those cracks and holes or whatever that are out there, or can they be patched, or the holes are in it?
I don't know, they're flush now, pretty much, so.
But the flooring has been deteriorating more quickly each year. So I think you're gonna see,
Further deterioration.
yes.
I mean,
Is there any other major work that's planned out there in the next year that, you know, we have a mobilization cost is the other consideration because, you know, they're out there. So if we don't do the main floor, I would imagine the cost of doing the fields is gonna go up slightly maybe, or no?
I can't tell you, because we didn't bid that out separate. I mean, this has all been in the capital improvement plan, it was in the Parks and Rec plan,
Right.
which is why it's coming forward to you,
Yeah,
is that, you know, I don't think it's just been
No,
something that
it's
they
part
just
of the master
decided to go
plan.
do. I think it's because it's continuing, cracks are continuing, it's gonna continue, it's on the list to get
Right.
fixed. And I don't have a great answer for why it looks no different than the other one. I don't know what to tell you for that. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, I just wanted, I think you mentioned that you couldn't tell how much it was for the pad, but you said approximately $50,000, right?
I'm just guessing based on the square footage.
Yeah, it'd be a high number.
$6 a
I mean,
square foot. plus
Because I'm concerned
removal.
about the whole thing too, but then I'm looking at it and say, okay, I see some of the cracks and they could be worse, but now you're not talking 195 just for that cement, you're only talking maybe 50 for it, which, you know, helps me say that we should do the whole thing to get it done and completed. And it did look, I thought there was less cracks in the new pavilion than there were in this one, but I didn't look at every spot, so I can't say for sure.
I haven't looked at the new pavilion.
But at least I feel a little bit of comfort that we're not paying $195 just for that slab, we're only paying approximately $50 for it.
Yeah, you know, if you, like you say, if you take the square footage and you run it out at $6 a foot to
Right.
pour new concrete at 4 inches thick, and you probably got $5 a square yard to remove it, you're gonna be in the $50,000 to $60,000 range.
Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Wheatley, how long would it take to get back some numbers to us with the pad taken out of the,
Well, we'll have to ask the contractor if they'll do that.
and it's the one
And then-
contractor that's doing this?
Well, I mean, I'd have to talk to the attorney, because, you know,
gotta be
it's not really fair to the other contractor who bid on it if we start picking it apart and asking for different prices.
It has
So
to be completely rebid.
You probably wanna just rebid it if we're gonna put stuff out, which wasn't the intent of the original project.
What's the time frame on having to
Rebid it?
move forward on this bid? I mean,
Yeah, what's the job?
It's not it's not a large project. I think it's more, you know, if you start getting into September and October, then you're running up against some weather
But if we
issues on
gave
the field
approval-
portion. Because there will be some time to put in the, you know, electrical and the irrigation and things like that. But I think the whole project be done in 6-7 weeks.
but in terms of our approval of it, if we waited till our August 8th meeting, are we behind the 8 ball on it then, or?
Well, it'd probably be, if that's the case, it probably would get started after Labor Day.
We can't get the bids done by then.
But I mean, just if I'm not talking rebidding it, I'm just saying if this board wants to think about it for another week. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I think you can still build it this year.
Okay, so we could,
Does it
not that I
mess
wanna
up your
kick the can
schedule?
down the road, but, it may give some people some time to look at it again and think about it.
If we wait another week, is that gonna mess up your schedule as far as
It'll, yeah,
what
it'll
you
adjust
blocked
pavilion
out?
rentals because we have other rentals coming up after the time period that we blacked out.
Oh,
So we
after it even?
So we could,
Yeah,
so
this
we'd
fall.
lose some that, we'd have to cancel some that we've already booked then, right?
And there's still the other tournaments that are coming out there that you don't want construction going on with pavilions around there and having to worry about. keeping
Well, I'm sure there
people
probably will
safe.
be tournaments going on while that's being built.
Yeah, they're not gonna close the park for tournaments
For
for
a
6
pavilion,
weeks.
that's not
Concrete work.
reasonable.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Massey?
I think we need to, have another visit.
Mr. Lemina?
I think part of what, with the new board coming together, they weren't here when we started this process discussion in 2015, and I think it's important just to put it into perspective from what Kay has brought to you, is that when I first got here, we went out there and we ended up shutting down the basketball courts because the concrete was so heaved up and dangerous that we shut them off. We put tape in, we locked them down, we said you can't use them because they were in such rough shape that we were really concerned about an injury. And at that time, there was considerable discussion amongst the board and with Kay about, man, we've got to do a better job of preventive maintenance and get this thing together. So out of that hatched let's do a millage to do Parks and Rec repairs for capital repairs. And so that required about a year's worth of conversation and work to get that millage passed. And at that time, we asked the Parks and Rec Commission to present us with their plans, like what are you going to fix, what are you going to do for the first 4 or 5 years, and they brought that information to us and said, here's the things that we'll need to do for preventive maintenance. And quite frankly, she got beat up a little bit there were some seated board members at that time who said, well, I'm just shocked that you allowed this park to get in this kind of shape. And I think put that into perspective with Kay, that put together a 4 or 5 year project plan and said, well then, here's what I'm going to do. And the board accepted that plan, and it's been in place for a couple of years. She's moving along with the perception that you guys approved it without realizing. We got new board members who haven't seen the proposals. They weren't here when that came out, but it's part of the thing that Kay's been working on and putting her schedule around with, hey, here's how we're moving forward. The board's given us the blessing. They've agreed that these are the most important things. They're in our capital projects plan for the next 4 years. And so she comes to you today and you're saying, well, let's not do the floor. Maybe we can piece this together. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that for the board's perspective, that continuity's not here. It's not the same seated board that went through this prior. So if you put it from Kay's perspective, she's moving forward with a capital projects plan that, you know, the board has blessed. And so it's kind of, that's why it was bid the way it was bid. Hey, we got some economy of scale here. We can do the field and the pavilion at the same time. The barbecue's got to get done because that's definitely a trip and fall hazard. If the board is uncomfortable with doing it, then I think you do need to step back if you're not going to do it. But to do it properly, you have to rebid the entire thing. And if you want it broken down into separate pieces, we can do that. But you're going to have to rebid the entire thing, and that means this gets pushed back. I mean, we got to have at least 30 days to put RFPs together and rebid, and I don't know what kind of responses we get, or if these guys hopefully will still rebid it with just the breakout, but it will, most likely it's not going to get done this year would be my guess.
No, and the prices will probably go up a little if you're trying to do it this year.
Mr. Atkins?
I understand trying to rebid it and the time and stuff involved in that, but if the newer pavilion is already displaying signs of stress cracks, isn't now the time to understand how much it's going to be each time we have to redo the concrete in these? This case is bundled with some other things. If you look at the newer pavilion, and we're going off, I don't know, it looks like it's getting bad because that's kind of what we're saying now with this one, because there's no data, there's no trip hazards, there's just cracks. So the newer one also has cracks. Wouldn't it be good to know how much that cost? Maybe there's a frequency you have to redo these. If that's our criteria for keeping a safe, aesthetically pleasing pavilion, then it would be nice to know what is that cost alone. Because you look at the newer pavilion and going off the criteria that we're going to approve to do the repaving of the older pavilion, looks like you'll need to do the newer one pretty soon too. You're gonna stay consistent.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's got to get put in the capital improvement plan for so many years down the line that pavement gets replaced. You're right.
But I'm saying if we have this bundled together, you know, if we look at unbundling it and doing the RFP process again and seeing, isn't it a worthwhile exercise to understand what that cost is just for that project?
Yeah, with the way you do that though is you put together an estimate. I mean, because over time that number is going to change. So we put together what hopefully is a kind of a fat estimate, and that's what goes in the capital improvement plan list.
Right.
We don't get bids for all of those. We base those prices on recent bids, and then, you know, a lot of times we'll put some escalators in there because we know that capital improvement plan is going to go over 5 to 10 years. So we fatten those up a little bit, and that's what we do. And then the board, you know, Parks and Rec board, and whoever consultant you pick to help do your Parks and Rec plan helps put together that capital improvement plan.
I understand the process. My question is, would this be the time to RFP to understand exactly how much it costs to repave a pavilion floor? If we're saying that we're looking to replace it because there's cracks in it, there's cracks in both of them. The new one, and there's also cracks in the one that's almost 30 years old. They look about the same. If we're going off just the visual, is now the time to understand exactly how much that cost is. I understand the process. Maybe that question is to the superintendent more than...
Ms. Lane, you
In addition to the cracks, Mr. Atkins, there are holes in the old pavilion as well that maybe we missed. And so there are no holes in the new pavilion.
I didn't miss those. I did see them on the outside parameter. I think that's more of a, it could be repaired with some patchwork, but that's my opinion.
Mr.
The other alternative, you can go back and ask both of the responsive bidders to see if they can separate out. If both of them can do it, then I think you wouldn't have to rebid it if they both have the ability to separate out what the pouring the pad is going to be for the pavilion. And as long as they can both do it, or if both are willing to do it, I think then it would be acceptable for us as far as not having to rebid the entire project.
when was the project supposed to start? I mean, when would they break ground?
Well, soon, probably in August.
So if
We gotta get the bonds and insurance. That's
So I mean, if they were able to break that out, and first week, I mean, our meetings, the 8th, well, 8th and 9th, but, we gave them the word then, I mean, it seems like it's.
But you'll have to do it as alternatives, not just these alternatives, because it's probably gonna drive the price up if they're not doing
Yeah,
the entire thing.
I guess we'll have to ask them for their unit, like a unit price
Rebid.
schedule on the field, all the stuff.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Would that be possible to ask Mr.
We
Lehman?
can always ask.
And if we brought it back to the board on the 8th,
That would be enough time to make it work, is what he's saying, right? Would it be or not be?
I got 2 weeks, all right? What's the date today? Yeah.
2 weeks from,
Or do we need a
Today.
special meeting? Because we could call a special meeting if we have to hit a deadline.
I don't know why they couldn't do that in 2 weeks. I mean, I'll have to ask them, but
let's,
I don't know if we'll get a response. The second bidder was
Right.
like $100,000 over that. He may not even respond, but
Yeah.
we can ask, and that way we've asked both of them.
I think, it sounds like, I don't know, like we're uncomfortable with making the current decision without getting some more information. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chairman, the superintendent brought up an interesting point. Anytime you're doing an estimate, regardless how they combine all the numbers, I'm quite sure they did each item separately in their write-up sheet for their personal use. I just cannot see a company coming out, combining everything together. All of my years doing estimates, yes, I combine them together so to give you, but for my personal sheet, I always had separate data. If I'm gonna do the floor, that was an estimate for the floor. If I'm gonna do the other part, that was an estimate for that. But I just didn't show you that, okay? So they have to have done that. That's just my take on it. It only take a few weeks for us to learn what they have done, right?
So would it be acceptable to our board if we asked Mr. Wheatley to get some prices on, I mean, obviously that the pavilion needs to have some of that work done and to have that broken out separately and come back to the board on the 8th. If that timeline doesn't work for getting it underway in time to have it done during the timeline that Ms. Edson has blocked off any rentals, then we need to know that, and maybe we can have a special meeting or to make sure that we look at those numbers and meet that deadline.
But
Mr. Thomas?
Supervisor Bennett, through you to Superintendent Lemata, didn't you just say, even if we break up the estimates and break up everything, if we take one of the bids out, say, okay, we'd like to do this project next year, we'd still have to go through the whole 60, 90-day process again, correct? No. The RFPs.
Well, if we did it next year, we would, but
Well, I'm just saying if we did everything, the fields, everything, and say, okay, we'd like everything done except we don't want to redo the large pads, we'd still have to go and do the whole RFP program again.
no.
I think one of the challenges you might have from a contractor standpoint is they don't want to guarantee what their price is going to be next year because they don't know what the cost of materials or what's going on.
Well, I didn't say next year.
I know, but if you're saying, hey, we're going to split this up, let's do some of this next year, I don't think they're going to guarantee their bid price holds for next year. So yeah, you'd have to redo the entire bid process for those portions.
And if we did redo the bid process next week or 2 weeks, then we would have to start the process all over again.
I think we're getting some things mixed up. What Mr. Lemata said that we might be able to do is have Mr. Wheatley go back to the two bidders and say, how much is it to do all this work except for the pad? And then they come back to us with, here's what the costs are just to do everything without the pad. We're not saying next year or whatever, just
okay. Can we do
that?
that?
But I think that's where we have to tell them that they're going to do it a la carte. They may approve some, not approve
Right, we have to tell them that that's
because
more
that'll
than
change
likely
the
going
bid
to come
prices on everything.
out of their overall bid.
the consensus I'm hearing.
That option will be you may select to take that out of the bid altogether.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong.
I just wanna
but-
know if it's one or the other. I mean, can we vote on the whole project, or can we actually vote on the piecemeal?
Well,
We don't
the,
know
con-
until
the-
we ask.
Still,
the consensus I'm hearing is that everybody agrees the field needs to be done. So that's not a question. We know that. The only thing that we're looking at is that pad. I mean, everything else we're saying, the drainage, you know, what have you, that needs to be done. But the only thing we're questioning is the pad. So if they come back to us and say, okay, if you take the pad out, here's the price to do everything else. And that's what we're looking at.
So just that for point of clarification, just remember, you guys have looked at a lot of our road projects and different projects that we've seen, and you've seen bids come in all over, like, how come this guy's charging this much for gravel and this guy's only charging this
Right.
much, and you've seen them all over the place. It's because it's their overall bid. They're like, yeah, okay, this, I don't care about this because this is where it's going to be the
Right.
bottom line. Same thing holds here. They think that they're coming in and doing this whole project. They're going to bid it one way. If you try to pull it out now and hold them to the other prices,
It's not
I'll
gonna-
be surprised if they're willing to do that. It's going to, I think what we have to do is tell them that every one of these is going to be looked at as an optional
Right.
project, because if they're not going to have this big project, they're not going to be able to roll out there just to do the barbecue
Right.
grill area.
Right.
That price is going to
Okay.
go up considerably higher because they're just coming out to do a barbecue area,
So we
as
tell them
opposed
to
to
bid
doing
it
it
a
on
la
the
carte
corner
then.
big pad. So we just have to be honest with them and tell them, give us a
Detail of all of it.
as if we were going to a la carte each one of these, and then the board can make a decision on what you want to do. You'll be able to see what drove the prices up or what the new prices are, and then
And if they can't
take
do it by us,
they have a different recommendation for you at that time.
and if our time frame of voting on this thing on the 8th isn't gonna work, then we need to know about that and move it up, you know, and have a special meeting if needed.
Excuse me.
Mr.
Supervisor, I think we're maybe trying to overcomplicate this thing. All we're talking about, as far as I've heard, is the package as it exists today and the package without the pad. We're not asking for breakouts of everything else. We're bought off on the field or bought off, and it's just so it's like using their existing bids and just say, okay, well, what is without the pad?
Right.
I mean, I mean, we don't need to a la carte. You know, we don't need to have them stack these things on top of each other like they normally would.
Just price, they
Without.
gave us the price with the pad,
No,
now we
what-
want the price
without,
without the pad.
yeah.
Well, there's a couple differences also I want to point out. Now they know each other's prices. So they may look at this you may end, there's a slim, and Mr. Laddie can help me, but there's a slim chance it could be a problem. Because they know each other's prices and they could vie to get the job, or I don't know. I mean, it's complicated. It isn't as simple as it sounds. I wish it was.
It
but
is as simple as it sounds.
You know, it's
But-
not,
but-
it's not as simple as it
It
sounds.
is as simple as it sounds. Now, the outcome may be a little different.
You
Mr.
can't
Lemon?
create legal challenges though, and
Mr. Lehman,
You may,
Go ahead.
that's the biggest. We have to be prepared for a legal challenge, because now I've seen prices and I say, well, wait a minute, I'll come in, I'm going to give you an entirely new bid, and the guy's like, well, if you're going to rebid this thing, I mean, it may end up where if we get challenged like that, you have to go back and rebid the whole dang thing anyway, because that is a big thing. They've seen each other's.
I mean, we can try it. It's just that there's that risk, is what I want to point out to you.
Ms. Lane?
I think we're trying to make it too complex, and I am, again, going to reaffirm the efforts of the Parks and Rec and our director. And costs are gonna go up if you wait, costs are gonna go out if you separate them to an à la carte or pull out the cement. They came, I think they deserve an answer, and I'm never afraid of a 4-3 vote on certain things. Nobody, no board is ever unanimous, nor do I always want to keep looking for some way for it to be unanimous, because sometimes it never will be. So I would say we call the question tonight, and we can do more studies as the newer members of this board want. As an experienced board, I'm saying, move forward. We have other things of higher importance we want to accomplish.
Given the legal challenge to rebidding it, or to being required to rebid it, puts a new wrinkle in things, I think, a little bit.
Mr. Chair, what you have now is you have a bid based on the, whatever the ROP said, and you're asking these guys to go back and they know what the overall prices are now, and they're gonna try to break their bids out. We're not, you know, we're gonna get the information, we're gonna treat it confidentially, but they may not do that, they may not be able to do that. I think we can work around it potentially if we need to, except that if something goes awry, if one of the two of them say, well, I'm not participating in that process, then you're off the rails. But I guess it doesn't hurt to ask. As to Ms. Lane's point, Ms. Lane, were you one of the makers of the motion? Or
Yes,
the,
sir, I
okay.
was.
Because we have a motion on the floor, and we have a second, and the way to get around that is to either have the motion, or the maker of the motion and the second withdraw that motion, and if they won't, then you're gonna vote on the question, and you're gonna have a new.
She just called the question, which kind of means stop talking about it and take a vote.
Yeah, well, it tells me
Well, it
she's
wasn't
not gonna
seconded.
withdraw the motion, so. So one way or the other. You
Her
gotta-
motion to ask for the call for the vote wasn't seconded though, but.
I just had a
Mr.
question,
Guzak.
I just
That's
had a
probably
question
what
that,
you call the
once we
question.
get the information, if we did it in, like on August 8th, we still can okay the whole bid, right, if we want to, and I agree, it should be detailed in there. Going forward, we should always have details on each section, so that way if we need to pull it out, we can tell. So that's just gonna be one of our future requirements. I think it's a good idea, because we should know what it is and not a bundle.
I would like to second, or not very much support Treasurer Guzak's point, that to have stuff like this just bundled together seems to me to be just not a very satisfying way to do this.
Yeah, so
so
we
we
can
can-
set that going
Yeah,
forward.
we should set that going forward, I agree.
But can we, you know, once we get the information, can we still vote and still get the full package in August 8th? That's my question, I guess.
Well, and I said that if Mr. Wheatley can check with the contractor, and if that isn't gonna work, we can have an emergency meeting prior to that.
It's fine.
And then say we can take the bids as
Then we
they
decide,
presented,
you
right?
know.
Then we can decide at that point, right?
Right. So I
Yeah, I'll talk
agree
to
with
him
you,
and see
Mr.
if we
Guzak.
can get that
So
before the
that's where
next
I
one.
would be, but, who made the motion, Ms. Lane, and whom seconded it?
Mr. Thomas.
That'd be more in favor of what Mr. Guzak suggested, Mr. Thomas. Okay, so Ms. Lane asked for us to vote,
Vote for what?
on her motion, or I
What
guess,
was the motion?
Her motion to
What's on
approve.
the agenda?
can another motion, what Mr. Guzak mentioned, come forward, or?
If her
Would you
motion
prefer to-
fails, then the
Okay.
floor is open for a new motion.
Okay, so we'll vote on Ms. Lane's motion first, and then Mr. Guzak can make his motion. So,
Are we gonna be okay if we do that? That's my question.
Well, I think,
We can
well,
reintroduce it
from what I'm
when we
hearing,
want
you're not gonna know the answer
Until we give
the
Mr. Wheatley talks.
The two firms that bid, if they're accepting this.
So it could be the whole thing's turned off then, right? The whole thing could go away. Is that?
Well, no, I mean, presumably, if they don't want to participate in our amendment of their bid, they may just say, I'm gonna stick with what I have, or potentially one or two of them could say, I'm withdrawing my bid, in which case you are going through that three-bid process. You won't know that until you get some feedback from Mr. Wheatley.
So, all those in favor of Ms. Lane's proposal?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Mr. Guzak, you want to make a motion to the effect of what you've mentioned? That we would ask Mr. Wheatley to,
Yeah, just to check it out and see if they can at least tell us what it is.
It's a
and then
heck
we-
of
then
a
we-
motion.
What?
Check it out. Great motion. I'll support that motion.
All right.
well, we have a consensus, it sounds like, of the board that we want to check out a little bit further in terms of the pricing, and I don't know if it's possible too, Mr. Wheatley, to take a look at the stress fractures, you know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't want to interrupt, but
Yeah.
it sounds to me like you're directing Mr. Wheatley to go back and see if he can amend the proposals to provide the information that we discussed earlier as far as the potentially breaking out the various costs of the project. Jack, do you have direction from this board if they said, go back and make contact and see if you can
Yeah,
reconfigure the bids?
Yep.
That sounds good. You're asking Mr. Wheatley has been given direction to reconfigure the bids and bring back information.
Is that your motion,
Yes,
Mr. Guzak?
yes.
Support.
That's
Yes,
Mr.
thank you.
Guzak's motion. Okay, it's seconded by whom?
Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Thomas. All those in favor say
Aye.
aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next item is, and
Supervisor Bennett?
I just want to say, go ahead. Mr.
No, I'm
Thomas.
finished. I want to go to the next topic.
I just wanted to say, and I appreciate all the work that Ms. Edson and the Parks Commission put into this, and And I agree, we want it to be a premier park. I think our board concurs that we want it to be a premier park, and I think our only concern is making sure that if there's a way to spend the money and spread it around, that we look at doing that, so. Anyways, Mr. Mansour?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the purchase of Human Resources Net and Access My Government Employee Self-Service Module for the amount of $20,925.
Support.
Okay. Mr. Lima, do you want to add anything to that?
No.
What? No?
Discuss this.
I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Miss Supervisor Bennett.
Is anybody hearing anything from the community?
Well,
Supervisor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got
I'll make a motion to accept
The alcohol
Yeah.
item
I'm sorry.
D.
for Allied Challenge.
I've got an old agenda in front of me.
Yeah, here you go.
I'll
Okay.
move that we adopt a resolution,
Second.
approve the request for the tournaments for charity of.
For the Allied Challenge?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Second it.
It's a roll call vote, gentlemen. Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Discussion? Just want to let everyone know that our own State Representative Tim Sneller was the author of this law that went through the state legislature for this, that we're voting on tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thomas.
Thank you, State Rep Sneller.
Okay.
And also,
Absolutely.
hopefully, everybody attends the Open. It's coming up in the week of September 15th, and
Yeah.
try to enjoy it and
Aye.
make it a big success.
There's actually a few announcements that will be coming forward too, regarding some more things to add on to it, but I'm
Great.
not privy to say what they are. So go ahead, Ms. Lane, if you want to call the vote.
Thank you for permission, Mr. Supervisor. Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Buzak?
Yes.
Myself, Mr. Supervisor.
Yes.
Approved unanimously.
Okay. Is anybody hearing anything from the community?
Something about a cement slab on it.
Yeah, I heard from this weekend about the parking permit.
Yes. For the Allied Challenge?
The Allied Challenge, yeah. I think that they had to educate a couple of residents that asked me about it in comparison to where we were before.
With the Buick Open?
The Buick Open, that this is less money, it's easier, and we have an ordinance that protects our residents from cars being parked all over the place.
Right.
And why this is not only not new, but an improvement to before. So I just wanted to say that I had to explain that to them.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Mr. Mansour, because in the past, individuals wanting to have parking on their property would have to come before the ZBA, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Laddie?
That's correct.
And they had to pay $150.
Yeah, 450.
Yeah, so $450. So we've streamlined it to make it an administrative decision, so they don't have to schedule a time. And then also the fee is substantially less. But yes, it is meant to protect both the residents, our premier community, and the tournament, because if we just allow people to park everywhere, it could turn into a real mess.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. Anything else that anybody has that? We've talked quite a bit about what we're hearing in the community earlier with regard to fire and a few others, but anything for future board agendas other than what we have planned? Mr. Limita, Mr. Laddie, you have anything?
No, sir.
For the good of the board? Our next board meeting will be Wednesday, August 8th. We're not going to be meeting on Tuesday next month because of the election that will be taking place. And we hope that everybody gets out and votes for the fire millage, and we've heard all the reasons why. Please let your neighbors know why you should be voting in favor of it.
Mr. Chair, before we adjourn, we meeting on the 6th at 6:30?
Not that I'm aware of.
Where's the photo?
Oh, that's
No,
no,
the photo's going to be on the
night.
On
Yeah.
the 9th?
9th
Yeah.
at 6:30.
Oh,
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Or
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?